I'm supposing that it might be helpful to make some few comments regarding Saul and David as we have finished 1 Samuel and have entered into 2 Samuel, and David has received the throne and conquered Jerusalem and brought in the Ark of God. Going back to Saul, I think it's rather funny that he is selected while he's trying to find his father's donkeys that have gone astray. But never mind that. When he is finally proclaimed or is to be shown to be the chosen king, he seems very reluctant, even though he's already been anointed. He's hiding in the baggage. And he also seems reluctant to take up arms, but he finally does, and he has mighty men with him, and he deals with one of the neighboring kings who has subjected to Israel and wins victory. Then there's dealing with the Philistines, and Jonathan seems to be quite the warrior hero. Saul is reluctant, but will go according to the word of the Lord, but he also makes the mistake of not waiting for Samuel to make the sacrifice, takes it upon himself to do it as the Philistines are gathering strength and his troops are leaving him. And so Saul seems a little bit reluctant and then rather nervous and a bit rash. He also makes rash oaths to his and his people's own hurt. There's the business of not letting the soldiers eat, or no one will eat until the enemies are vanquished. And Jonathan has not heard the order and takes a little honey. And then the people end up slaughtering animals and eating meat with the blood in it because they're so hungry. It's just his reluctance and then rashness and doesn't turn out well ever. And then finally, there's his disobedience in claiming to have done what the Lord commanded, but having spared and taken spoil, which he wasn't supposed to, and asking forgiveness after it's pointed out and after Saul has tried to justify himself. And Samuel announces that God has chosen another after God's own heart. Saul's final downfall is after Samuel is dead, and since Saul can't get word of the Lord as to what may happen when he goes up against the Philistines, he finally hires a medium. And this is, of course, against the law of God and the law that God gave to Moses, and is against even what Saul had done in Israel to wipe the practice out. And while I don't know that we can trust or scholars suggest that we can't trust the word of the medium as to what she saw and what Samuel had to say, truly it's clear that this hasn't helped Saul any to find out through a medium. With regard to David, and we have him almost forgotten by his father, as Samuel was told by God to go to Jesse, the Bethlehemite, and anoint one of his sons. We also have David brought to Saul for playing the lyre to ease Saul's the bad spirit, the evil spirit that the Lord has brought upon Saul to disturb Saul further. And then we have the incident with David fighting against Goliath of Gath. Now, while David seems wonderfully heroic, the thing that has brought him to fight against Goliath is that Goliath has openly defied the army of the God of Israel, and therefore openly defied God. And this seems to be the thing that brings David to the point of claiming that he would willingly go up against the Philistine. And David is also, it might be pointed out by some, it has been, he's an innovator in that rather than going up arms against arms, he uses a sling. Now, this is not a slingshot, this is a sling. This was a deadly weapon going way back, and it might be at this time that slingers were regularly used in battle, but they were sort of support kind of the artillery behind the battle line. David goes out single-handedly with a sling, and we know the story about killing the Philistines, and the Philistines fled, and David wins this victory, and then Saul takes him into his personal guard and gives David charge and command. So David is an innovator. He is zealous for the honor of God, and he's not reluctant. He also seems to be a bit of a hothead, but he's not unwilling to listen to others and be moderated when it came to this woman, Abigail, who is married to this man who is known, in fact, his name even means foolish one. David is willing to listen to her and relent with regard to Nabal, when David had fled with many men from Saul and are basically wandering around. David is also not willing to take matters into his own hand with regard to Saul, because Saul is also the Lord's anointed. David is willing to wait and wait upon the Lord. And, of course, if he were to take matters into his own hands with regard to the Lord's anointed, well, if David's the Lord's anointed, that means that others could very willingly take matter into their own hands regarding David. I don't know if David is thinking that far down the line, but David seems willing to wait and let things happen and to see how things turn out. He's also willing to even go into the camp of the enemy, the Philistines, and serve there if it means relief for the people who follow him, and also to be shielded from further depredations from Saul. And yet he's quite the trickster in that, being with the Philistines, he goes out and fights against smaller enemies of Israel and brings back spoil and lets the king of the Philistines think that David is fighting or despoiling Israel. So he is deceptive. He is willing to use tactics that are unorthodox. He is very zealous for the Lord's honor. But we will find that there will be times that he takes matters into his own hands, and particularly with regard to the wife of Uriah the Hittite. And because of that, David brings more trouble, as God has said, will say, to David's own household, and it even divides the kingdom. It's like there's a couple of civil wars because of David's actions and what it does, bringing strife to his own household. So I mention all this because there are certain persons that I know who are very sincere followers of Christ who really don't like David at all and are not happy to be having lessons of the Old Testament about how wonderful David is and how heroic David is, because David certainly has character flaws. Now, it is the case that we're talking about the early to middle Iron Age. It is the case that the organization of the government of Israel is not nearly as organized as is present nations of the earth. It seems that, yes, the strong survive, and there's people of the nations of the earth that are willing to take any means necessary for their own success and looking out for themselves. And David is one that is not ready to just quickly take vengeance upon his enemies, especially if they're within the household of Israel. He's not one to show mercy to anybody who does wrong, thinking that they're doing David a favor. There is that sense of a kind of justice with him, but we will also find that he has his own flaws, and we also see that he is often rather high-handed himself, and but he's also one to use unusual tactics. So there's a lot to say with regard to his success, but the best of his character is when he is zealous for the name of the Lord or for God's honor. There is that aspect to him. When it's about his own prestige or his own self, he does not have a very good character. And I've sat through many a Sunday school lesson and many a Bible lesson about how great and wonderful David is and in David's character. God has chosen David as a man after God's own heart. That doesn't mean that David by any means is always acting in the best of righteousness. There are those times that he is zealous for the name of the Lord, but when left to his own devices and his own power, he is as flawed and as dangerous as practically anybody else in the same position. But there are those times that he is not ready to take matters into his own hands. He's willing to let things fall out, and he is not going to reward people who do horrible things, thinking that David will somehow benefit them for what they have done for David's benefit, if it is clearly against God's law. So I guess this is repeating myself a few times in this, but that's the one thing that is authenticates the scripture for me, is that the ones we would like to be heroic and make out to be heroes are not really that heroic most of the time. And it's rather unusual that an ancient people would show all the flaws and all the mistakes and make clear all those flaws and mistakes. It's clear that what is unfolding is by God's plan, but not by anybody's righteousness or by their own strength, but simply because of God's love and promise for the world. And yes, there are many of God's instruments who are terribly flawed in bringing about what God promises. I hope this is of some help and some clarity as we go through this reading of the Bible through the year. Thank you very much.